Hello, everyone. My name is Ariel Silverman, and today I'm going to talk about moving beyond inclusion, the magic of disability communities. I wear a couple of different hats here. Growing up totally blind in a Reformed Jewish congregation, I have a lot of firsthand experiences that you might find informative. I am also a disability research fellow at the University of Washington and just completed a doctorate in social psychology. So I've done some research on disability identities and communities that I'll be sharing with you today. 1 in 7 people in this country have a disability of some kind, and including Jews with disabilities in congregational life is obviously important. Discussions of disability inclusion often focus on how to make activities accessible to those with various needs, and how to appropriately accommodate folks with disabilities so they can fully participate. And these are important things, of course, but I want to take the discussion a step forward and talk about how we can empower people with disabilities, helping them feel respected, making full use of their capabilities, and allowing them to contribute and serve as leaders. So I'm going to begin here by describing the disempowerment that many people with disabilities experience and the challenge that this disempowerment can pose for Jewish identity. Then I will describe how joining disability communities can help people feel empowered and how this sense of empowerment can help them participate more actively in their non-disability communities as well. And then finally, I'm going to suggest some strategies that congregations can use to help people balance the need for inclusion in the mainstream world with their affinity to join disability groups. So people often think that the hardest part of having a disability is the physical impairment, not being able to see, hear, speak, or walk, for example. But many disabled people I know would say that the way they are perceived and treated by others is far more difficult to handle than the physical limitations. And it's not necessarily that people don't want to include or help those of us with disabilities. And in fact, most people in America today have very good intentions and they want to be inclusive. In fact, too much helpfulness can be more of an issue than too little, as it can send the message that people with disabilities are seen as less competent or less independent. And this is actually true. So in one research study, college students were asked to generate words that they associated with the typical disabled man or disabled woman. And the most common themes that came up were words related to incompetence, dependence, and asexuality. In many ways, both explicit and subtle, society sends disabled people the disempowering message that they are seen as less competent, less independent, and even less sexually vital than everyone else. We know that everybody has a fundamental desire to be and to be seen as whole, effective, and competent, what some researchers refer to as having self-integrity. But many social characteristics like race, gender, and disability are perceived in ways that threaten self-integrity because they're perceived negatively or devalued social identities. For disabled people, being overprotected or passively excluded can hurt even more than being actively excluded because it threatens that sense of self-integrity. Further, disability is a minority group like some of these other characteristics. And a person with a visible disability like me is often the only one with said disability in their school, in their workplace, or in their Jewish community. This status of being the token, the only one, can become lonely and disempowering in the same way as being the only Jew at a Christmas party or the only woman or man in a work team. It can make you feel like a sore thumb and worry about how others perceive you. Some folks would say that the best way to blend in and be empowered is to pass or pretend not to have a disability, or at least distance oneself from it as much as possible. In fact, many folks with less visible disabilities try this approach. And oftentimes it doesn't work well for them because hiding something that shapes how you interact with the world can be extremely stressful, and not using assistive technology can limit one's independence a great deal. So passing is often impractical, and keeping a secret like that can cause a lot of stress. It's kind of like being in the closet. A second way to manage self-integrity is to withdraw or pull away from people who show signs of viewing the person with disability as less competent. This can obviously have detrimental effects. I have known people who actually cut themselves off completely from family relationships with family members who doubted their abilities to live on their own or to raise their own children, for example. If people sense any non-acceptance or disempowerment within the Jewish communities that they are a part of, they might be inclined to withdraw from them. Even without any open hostility, people can sometimes pick up on cues of threat or things that seem like cues of threat. Things like how many other people like them are in a group. So if someone is the only person with a disability in a synagogue, they might become concerned about how others in the synagogue perceive their disability identity and pull away if they don't feel comfortable. But fortunately, besides passing or withdrawing, there is a third way that people can manage a disability identity. That is, they can turn it into a positive aspect of themselves by affiliating or hanging out with others who share their disability status. In such like company, a disability is no longer a liability. There are many ways for folks with disabilities to affiliate. Many physical disabilities have consumer organizations, like the National Federation of the Blind and the National Association of the Deaf. For kids and teens, there are summer camps across the country, and for adults, there are support groups and social clubs. The internet makes affiliation easier than ever with email groups, Facebook, and web forums dedicated to specific disabilities. And finally, there are cross-disability groups like the Society for Disability Studies. There are several benefits to disability affiliations. First and foremost, a disability group is a rare oasis where the loneliness of token status is gone. Having a disability becomes normal and ordinary rather than a reason to stick out. There's something special about being able to share disability-related frustrations with other people who have had the same experiences. In a disability community, there's also less risk of sitting at the bottom of the totem pole, the social hierarchy. And I know this from my own experience as the only blind kid in my classes at school, in Hebrew school. I often had to ask to join games with my classmates who sometimes were reluctant to include me at all. But when I went to camps with other blind kids, I was not only in the games, but was often the one organizing the games or leading the games. When I was at school in Hebrew school as a teenager, the boys often ignored me, but at the blind camps, the boys and I used to tease each other in kind of age-appropriate ways, and as I got older, my girlfriends and I had our first little romances with boys who were also blind. So in disability communities, the disability is no longer a negative feature. It becomes a neutral feature, or sometimes even a positive one, that binds people together. For all of these reasons, disability affiliation is psychologically empowering. The confidence that I've gained from being in this oasis over my life has helped me to work well with my non-disabled coworkers and form a strong relationship with my non-disabled husband. But of course, many folks also choose to marry others who share their disability. Disability communities also empower people by helping them exchange a lot of practical information. So they provide psychological support, and they also provide a lot of practical and material support. Over many years, people naturally become experts on the best ways to adapt to specific challenges. They can then share their expertise with others who have the same disability. People can pool their expertise together and both become more adept at handling the challenges posed by their disability. As another personal example, my best friend is also blind, but while I was born blind, she didn't become blind until she was about 12. So I learned Braille when I was younger, and I was able to teach her some things about Braille and computer usage for blind people as she was becoming blind. However, when I was growing up, I wasn't taught a lot of good techniques for cooking and house cleaning. She lived with a single mom and had to handle a lot of the household chores herself. So she taught me how to do a lot of those things without sight, including cleaning the toilet. Because of our friendship and sharing our expertise, as adults, we both now know how to read Braille, how to use the computer, how to cook, and how to clean the toilet. So we put our expertise together and become more adept at doing all of these things with our disability. My blind friends have taught me that many things I thought I couldn't do because of my disability are actually possible once I've learned the proper techniques or accommodations. And this leads to another benefit. Disability communities can help individuals with disabilities, as I've described. They can also help congregations figure out how to best include disabled members. As a synagogue or youth group leader, you might be unsure how to best include someone who has a physical limitation and wants to go on a hiking or camping trip. This person might not be sure how to participate either. As a program leader, you can turn to the disability organizations to find out how others have handled this situation in the past. Or disability groups can help you figure out how to make materials on your website accessible, how to offer sign language interpreting at your events, and things like that. The benefits of joining disability groups are underscored by research. In a study that I conducted for my dissertation, I asked blind adults what proportion of their friends were also blind. Those who said that they had at least one blind friend were more likely to have jobs than those who said that they did not have any connections with blind people. Not only that, but they had higher paying jobs, higher incomes, they were happier with their lives overall, they were less lonely, and they had more positive feelings and beliefs about their disability. And this is interesting because some people might think that success comes from full inclusion or being completely immersed and assimilated in the non-disabled community, but that's not what the research is showing. The research is showing that the people who had no disability connections, who were completely immersed in the non-disabled community, were actually less happy and less successful than those who had at least one connection with the disability community. And the benefits of joining with similar others in general aren't just limited to disabilities either. There's evidence that people with breast cancer live longer if they join support groups for their disease, and people with mental illness who join support groups have higher self-esteem than those who don't. And recall that Jewish immigrants to the United States tended to stick together in neighborhoods within large cities like New York City and formed local support networks. At first, this was a matter of basic survival, but even today, when it is relatively safe for Jews to assimilate into mainstream society, many of us still choose to affiliate with synagogues, not just for religious reasons, but also for cultural and community reasons as well. So I've described the many benefits people with disabilities can get from spending time with others who have disabilities too. To some, this might sound at odds with inclusion. We often think of inclusion as ignoring a person's disability and including the whole person in our community. To some, this might imply that the person can or should only affiliate with non-disability groups. As I've described, though, people who join disability communities are more successful in mainstream society as well. In addition to this, if people feel a strong tie to their disability identity, they might feel a tension between their disability community and the Jewish community. Being Jewish and being disabled are both minorities, so it's really rare to find friends who are both Jewish and who share your disability. So people might feel a pressure to choose one or the other group to really be a part of and strongly identify with. If people feel their Jewishness isn't fully respected in the disability community, they may start to disidentify with their disability and gravitate more toward Jewish friends. The same principle can work the other way. So if people feel their disability identity is not fully appreciated while they are in Jewish circles, they could choose to withdraw from those Jewish circles and focus more on their disabled friends. As with most things, I think we need to strike a balance. On one hand, we should work to make our Jewish communities more inclusive and empowering toward people with disabilities. This means the obvious, being sure that the physical spaces and the communications are accessible, but also thinking about ways to help our members with disabilities feel empowered and psychologically welcomed. For example, following their lead when deciding whether or how to adapt an activity so they can participate. Setting up programs so people of all abilities can participate without a lot of special accommodations or assistance. For example, by offering a choice between an art, music, sports, or drama activity on a youth retreat so everybody can excel. And instead of just helping them participate at the minimum, working to involve Jews with disabilities in leadership roles, giving them opportunities to give tzedakah and give back to their communities. But then the other half of it is that in order to really empower our members with disabilities, we should acknowledge and support their connections with disability groups. As I mentioned earlier, disability groups can be excellent resources for you to consult as program leaders to find out how to make your programs as accessible and inclusive as possible. If you are in the position of counseling a congregant who becomes disabled, or a new member who comes in who has a disability, tell them about local groups that you know of and encourage them to reach out. You can also help connect people you know who are both Jewish and who share a disability, which can be doubly exciting for both of them. Even if they don't live near each other, they can share a lot by communicating through emails, phone calls, and letters. There is at least one Facebook group that I'm aware of for Jews with disabilities, and probably some others that are specific to particular impairments. Another way to support disability affiliation is by encouraging folks to bring disabled friends or partners with them to Jewish events, even if those companions are not Jewish themselves. My blind best friend is not Jewish, but over the years, she has been able to join my family and me in Jewish rituals. In fact, she was one of the chuppah carriers at my wedding last year, which was a very meaningful involvement for both of us. So to sum up, here are a few important points that I'd like you to take away. First, one of the biggest challenges of having a disability is managing other people's perceptions of it. Disability, like race, gender, and religion, becomes an identity that too often other people view negatively. All of us have a drive to see ourselves positively and to have other people see all of our identities positively. People have several options for managing their disability identity. One of the best things they can do to manage their identity is to join disability communities and make friends who share the disability identity. In disability communities, the disability becomes a neutral feature or sometimes a source of group pride, and one is no longer the token disabled person in the group. Disability communities also offer a tremendous amount of practical information and collective expertise that can make the physical limitations less significant. Inclusion starts with making spaces accessible and welcoming to people with disabilities, but inclusion does not need to mean that disability identities and communities are ignored. Instead, by helping people build up their social connections, both within and outside the disability world, we can empower them to become truly equal members of our congregations. I've discussed a few ways to involve disability groups in your inclusion efforts. So on this slide here, I've included some links to disability organizations. And then on the final slide, I've included my contact information. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you'd like to know more about my experiences in the reform movement. Thank you.